This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, September 2nd. This is Africa 54. At least 6 people are dead as flash floods sweep away a tour group in Kenya's Hell's Gate National Park. Hurricane Dorian blasts the Bahamas while bearing down on the eastern U.S. states of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. And how a female kickboxer in Afghanistan is challenging norms. Tragedy struck at Kenya's Hell's Gate National Park on Sunday. Flash flooding killed 6 people after a tour group was swept away, according to the state-run Wildlife Authority. The incident occurred in the Rift Valley, some 69 kilometers northwest of Nairobi. The 6 bodies of the flash flood victims have been recovered, according to the Twitter account of the Kenya Wildlife Service. 1 tourist is still missing. Naivasha Sub-County Commissioner Matteo Yambogo says the 7 who were swept away were all Kenyans, 2 men, 2 women, and 2 minors. The Wildlife Authority closed the park to the public after the incident. A Sudanese judge has formally indicted ousted President Omar al-Bashir for corruption and illegally possessing foreign currency. In a Khartoum court Saturday, Bashir said he had received $25 million from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but that he had not used the money for private purposes, according to Reuters. The International Criminal Court has charged the 75-year-old former leader with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide for his actions during the long-running war in Sudan's Darfur region. In May, Bashir was also charged with incitement and involvement in the killing of protesters who challenged his rule. Pope Francis is scheduled to make his 4th trip to Africa when he visits Mozambique, Mauritius, and Madagascar from September 4th to 10th. The pontiff will travel to Mozambique's capital, Maputo, on Wednesday. Then he will move on to Antananarivo, Madagascar on Saturday, and Port Louis, Mauritius on Monday, according to the Vatican. Mozambique is still recovering from deadly cyclones that hit in March that triggered devastating floods in one of the worst weather-related disasters to hit the southern hemisphere. The Pope's last visit to sub-Saharan Africa was in 2015 when he traveled to Kenya, Uganda, and Central African Republic. Now to Burkina Faso, where 2 senior allies of deposed former President Blaise Compaoré were sentenced Monday to up to 20 years behind bars for organizing a 2015 coup attempt against a transitional government. Former spy chief General Gilbert Diendere was sentenced to 20 years in prison for murder and threatening state security, while former Foreign Minister Djibril Bassol, who was accused of being the coup's mastermind, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for treason. Now, cane weaving is a Nigerian art that is decades old, but the demand for imported furniture is hurting the business, and many involved in the craft are struggling to make a living. However, a government ban on furniture imports is boosting sales of locally made cane furniture. Timothy Abiazu has the details.
From cutting to framing, slicing and hand weaving, Sonny Anibode followed his older brother in this craft more than 2 decades ago. Cane weaving is part of his culture in Edo State in southern Nigeria. But Anibode came to Nigeria's capital and settled here in the hope of better business opportunities.
I started this work when I was in secondary school. I was just doing it as a part-time stuff, so before it became a professional work for me.
Cane weaving artistry dates back decades in Nigeria. But Nigeria's high demand for imported furniture means craftsmen like Anibode struggle to stay in business.
Whatever you do, they will say this is a local product. Even when you put in your best to meet a Western standard, there is this belief, okay, is it not produced here? It is because they have that alternative of having the foreign product Because of our mindset as especially Nigerians, we believe that anything that is coming from abroad is better than what we have here.
But this year, the Nigerian government ordered the restriction of imported products into the country, including furniture. The government says it wants to encourage local business and boost production. But economic expert Nonso Bikili says a ban like this could have a negative impact on Nigeria's economy.
Even in the healthiest economies, you find that there is a balance between imports of any particular item, including furniture, and those that are locally produced. It's the same everywhere. Now, in terms of a ban, theoretically, bans tend to be negative overall.
While cane weavers hope to see this ban turn around their businesses, furniture dealers like Emmanuel Onwe are also taking steps. After years dealing in imported upholstery, he's trying to introduce cane furniture on the side.
This is something we can move if our Nigerian government can stop importation of those things, because the China one where they import, they last.
Nigeria's imports last year totaled $36.5 billion, a 26.1% increase from 2017. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
In the past decade, the U.S. has seen a steady rise in the number of international students who enrolled in colleges and universities. But because of high tuition and fees, immigration concerns, divisive political talk, and perceived crime, international students are now considering other options. Sahal Majid has more in this report narrated by Jim Bartel.
Foreign students are looking at other countries to pursue their education because of the extremely high costs for attending American universities, according to studies.
It is no secret that compared to other nations, the cost of higher education in the U.S. is significantly higher.
But high tuition is not the only factor. A study by the Institute for International Education points to perceived crime in the U.S. and divisive political rhetoric aimed at immigrants.
Actually, this has become my prime concern, as my background is of an Indonesian, an Asian, and a Muslim. Also, my appearance is different, so people can tell that I'm from outside America. It will be a challenging situation for me to adapt in the States, even though at first I thought it wasn't a problem, as I felt that America was open-minded.
Other countries, such as Canada, are seen by some as more welcoming. It has looked to attract students from China, India, Philippines, Vietnam, and Pakistan by granting visas that take only 3 weeks to process.
We have found that, based on our statistics, that these are the countries that are most interested in sending students to Canada.
And while having fewer international students than the U.S., those in Canada find their immigration pathways are paying off.
After my undergrad degree, I got a 3-year open work permit, which is also called the postgrad work permit, and I applied for jobs. I got recruited in an accounting firm, and there I worked 1 year full-time, and which made me eligible to apply for permanent residence.
New Zealand, with 130,000 international students, is also beefing up its recruitment strategy.
The vast majority, about 50%, come from China and from India. But we also have, obviously, a big interest in finding students, the right students from South America, North America, and Europe, as well as the Middle East, Southeast Asia.
Despite this competition, some experts believe the U.S. can once again become the top choice for international students.
One of the fantastic things about the global higher education landscape is that any country can become a leading destination depending on the right factors. So the United States, for example, could become a leading destination once again and dominate for quite a while.
Chase adds that measures by universities, such as making international students feel more welcome through English language classes, networking, and student organizations, would help attract more foreign students. For Sahar Majid, Jim Bartel, VOA News.
Most migrants who arrive at America's southern border are from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And one U.S. Border Patrol in Texas apprehended people from more than 50 countries in the last year. VOA's Ramon Taylor spoke with asylum-seeking families who journeyed across the Atlantic and through the Americas en route to the U.S.-Mexico border, desperate for a new beginning.
More Central Americans are apprehended by U.S. Border Patrol than from any other region of the world. Yet in south-central Texas, many asylum seekers have traveled much further to get there. Out of more than 51,000 apprehensions in the fiscal year to date, U.S. Border Patrol's Del Rio sector reports more than 2,000 from Haiti and nearly 1,700 others from 36 countries across Africa.
In the social media world, they're here in Acuna, which is across from Del Rio, is a safe place to cross. So whether it's true or not, that's what people hear, and then they start moving that way.
The bandits jump down from the trees. Stop, give me your money.
But along their arduous journeys, word-of-mouth tips become leaps of faith. From East Kasai in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Julia and her 2 daughters fled their country in 2014. Julia's son had been murdered that year, and staying, she said, would have put her and her daughters at risk.
While you sleep, the thieves will come through the roof. They demand money, and if you don't have money, they'll rape your daughter.
Initially, they left for Angola, but Julia says it wasn't safe there either. So in 2018, they fled again. A flight to Ecuador, a bus and a boat to Colombia, then 14 harrowing days across the Darien Gap in Panama, a common route for African migrant families.
Most of the folks that we encountered had monetary funds to be able to purchase a ticket or coordinate transportation outside of the immediate border area. And so that facilitated, I think, a more rapid movement of their initial encounter to their ultimate release and then their travel into the interior to await an immigration hearing.
But near Mexico's southern border with Guatemala, many more migrants from Africa and Haiti have grown restless, waiting for weeks for transit permits to continue their travel north. Among those who ultimately make it across the border into the U.S. and are released from detention, many find new challenges in cities like San Antonio, Texas, lacking family or other contacts in the country.
Migrants from Africa just have a harder time finding, temporary host homes across the nation. So we've seen people stay a week or so.
They are in stark contrast to many Central Americans, Cubans, and Venezuelans who generally have more ties to the U.S. But many of them continue to await their own U.S. immigration hearings in Mexico under a policy known as Remain in Mexico.
I heard the news that I would be returned to Mexico. Filled with fear, I asked the official to leave me in the country. They said no, that I had to return to Mexico because that was their agreement with the government.
She plans to continue to wait until her day in court in late October. Ramon Taylor, VOA News.
Hurricane Dorian, a powerful Category 5 Atlantic storm, is battering the northern Bahamas and is heading toward the southeastern U.S. coast. VOA's Michael Sullivan has more.
Bringing churning seas and winds up to 280 kilometers per hour, Dorian struck the northern Bahamas Sunday, while communities like West Palm Beach, Florida, got ready. An emergency official says the storm should stall before it reaches the U.S. coastline.
Not making landfall, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. In fact, we expect hurricane-force winds to potentially hit the coast of Florida, and then a prolonged rain event combined with storm surge that's going to be very difficult as the storm starts to move northward.
Probably toward Georgia and South Carolina. It may possibly affect other areas. Some communities can expect coastal flooding and damage to infrastructure.
There'll be power outages, no question, and people need to be prepared for that. There will be storm surge, and unfortunately this storm's arrival aligns with what's called the king tide, one of the times of the year when the tide's the highest in the southeastern United States.
U.S. Navy ships in Florida have been moved away from the coastline as Dorian, seen here from the International Space Station, moves slowly westward. President Donald Trump is getting updates.
It seems to be one of the biggest hurricanes we've ever seen, and that's a problem. That's a problem.
Emergency workers are warning residents to brace for heavy winds and prolonged rain. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, in Afghanistan, blazing a trail through kickboxing. We'll be back.
It could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Transport electromobility, or e-mobility, is a relatively new idea in Rwanda. However, following the introduction of a national e-mobility policy and a call from President Paul Kagame to speed up the process, manufacturers are jumping on board. Electric vehicle company Ampersand is now helping Rwanda shift from gas-driven motorbikes to electric motorcycles. The e-mobility push is part of Rwanda's commitment to address the issue of transport-related pollution and move towards green mobility. Next up, there's a growing demand for a dedicated natural burial site in Tasmania, as people become more focused on reducing their environmental footprint and keeping costs to a minimum. Natural burials are eco-friendly and involve biodegradable coffins or shrouds. They are permitted in Tasmania under their current legislation as long as the bodies are covered in a meter of soil. But there are concerns the new draft Burials and Cremations Act will make it more difficult to establish a new standalone natural burial site in the near future. And finally, there was big drama on social media Friday when the account of Twitter chief executive Jack Dorsey was hacked, sending public tweets and retweets including racial slurs and curse words, to 4 million followers. Twitter said that it was aware the account was compromised and investigating what happened. One tweet claimed Nazi leader Adolf Hitler was innocent, while others contained racist comments against African Americans and Jews. Twitter shares fell less than 1% in after-hours trading following the hack. And that's what's trending today.
German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier bowed his head and asked for forgiveness for the suffering his nation inflicted on Poland and the rest of Europe during World War II. His comments came during a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the start of the World War II. Poland's leaders, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and other leaders were also in attendance. U.S. President Donald Trump had originally been scheduled to attend the event, but cancelled as Hurricane Dorian burrowed toward the U.S. For more on the commemoration, I'm joined from Warsaw by reporter Philip Crowther. Good evening, Philip. Fill us in on the latest, Philip.
Well, Vice President Mike Pence, who of course replaced Donald Trump at the last minute, has just departed Poland on a longer trip through Europe. And he encountered here in Poland, well, one of the best bilateral relationships the United States actually currently has under the Trump administration. The U.S.-Poland relationship is at a particularly good moment. We hear all the time from the Polish and the U.S. side. Now, what we also saw here...
Oh, Philip, I've lost the contact with you there, so hopefully we're going to just move on to the next story. And it's time, actually, for... all right. All right. It's time. Okay, Sandy, it's time for Amadi Sports Report. And our sports guru, Sunday Shomari, is in the studio. Hello, Sunday. What's happening in the world of sports?
Hi, Esther. Thanks. Over the weekend in the U.S. Open, Serbian Novak Djokovic's title defense came to an abrupt end in New York when he elected to retire from his fourth-round match against Stan Wawrinka due to a shoulder injury. Wawrinka was leading 6-4, 7-5, and 2-1 when the world number one, who has won 4 of the last 5 Grand Slam titles, decided not to continue and walked off the Arthur Ashe Stadium court to a chorus of boos. After dropping the second set, he immediately called for medical attention and sat courtside while the trainer massaged his shoulder. Up next for Wawrinka is 5th-seeded Russian Daniil Medvedev, who beat Germany's Dominik Kofa to reach his first Grand Slam quarterfinal. And Spanish soccer champions Barcelona has given up in their pursuit of footballer Neymar Jr., which will keep the Paris Saint-Germain star in France for another season. According to ESPN, the deal, however, isn't completely dead. By the report, Barcelona is expected to make a renewed effort to sign Neymar again next summer. Barcelona and PSG reportedly met multiple times this week to discuss Neymar's potential return to the Spanish club, but neither side was able to agree on a deal. PSG reported asked for $143 million. Neymar signed with PSG from Barcelona in 2017 for a record deal of $263 million. And in Formula One, racing Antoine Hubert's family and the motorsport world came together at Spa-Francorchamps, Belgium on Sunday to pay tribute to the French driver who was tragically killed during a race on Saturday. Hubert died after a huge impact with a car of Juan Manuel Correa while traveling at nearly 170 miles per hour at the steep corner of the circuit. Hubert's mother and brother held the helmet of the 22-year-old during a minute of silence prior to the Formula 1 race, as they were joined by drivers and manufacturers. 4-time Formula 1 world champion Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc were in attendance alongside their Ferrari team. Numerous drivers, including reigning Formula 1 world champion Lewis Hamilton, have expressed their condolences to Hubert and his family. And now to kickboxing. Since the fall of the Taliban in 2004, only 4 Afghanistan women have competed in the Olympics. But one 22-year-old kickboxer is hoping to change that. She is challenging women's roles in this male-dominated society and training other girls to fight alongside her. Kevin Enox narrates this report by Hedayatullah Nouri.
22-year-old Nafisa Mohammadi has been a kickboxing trainer in Kabul since high school and wants to share her skills with other girls.
I have been working as a trainer for the past 2 years. I have 2 clubs. There are 20 to 25 girls in each club.
But it hasn't been easy being an Afghan woman in the kickboxing world.
I am determined to help others if I can, so they can be able to practice any sport they may choose. I believe this should be a principal right of all girls in Afghanistan.
Before kickboxing, Nafisa learned Kung Fu and a few other martial arts. She's won 10 medals, and her goal is to compete on the world stage.
I had an opportunity to go abroad for matches, but unfortunately, I did not have money and someone to support me. Thus, I could not go abroad. I do want to go in the future.
Left, right, uppercut.
Nafisa understands the challenges she faces in a male-dominated society like Afghanistan, but believes girls should have the right to compete, especially in the Olympics. Now she wants to pay it forward and plans to expand her network of women's training clubs all over Afghanistan. Kevin Enox reporting for Hedayatullah Nouri in Kabul, VOA News.
Wonderful stuff right there. And that wraps our sports for today. Esther, back to you.
Thank you, Sandy. Good to see you again after that long stay in Egypt. But this is quite an inspiring story, right?
Yes, it was, Esther. As long as you see ladies taking action to do some great fighting and some skills here. You know, in a males-dominated world, you want to see some things like this changing. So it's a good thing for the ladies to do here, Esther. Maybe sometime, Esther, you can try that. Can you do that too?
All right, Sunday, thank you. I'll try that. Thank you, Sunday, for joining us. Join Sunday Shomari again next Monday for another sports report right here on Africa 54. Now, African beats are spreading worldwide due largely to a growing African population around the globe. But it's not just audiences from the diaspora that are dancing to the rhythm. As VOA's Jesusamen Ani reports, the international rise of Afrobeat is causing a stir in the music industry and influencing culture and markets in the West.
Pop beats from Africa are reaching airwaves and set lists as far away as Washington, D.C.
My favorite song on there, that's the Follow You. Yeah.
Known as Afropop or Afrobeats, the music genre, once limited to African circles, has gained traction in the West.
It's been really great seeing artists that a lot of us know in Africa make it on New York radio or DC radio or a radio station in Iowa. And people actually gravitating towards it.
Afrobeats got a big boost in recent years from songs that feature transatlantic collaborations with American chart toppers like Chris Brown, Drake, and Rick Ross. But those artists shouldn't get all the credit for sparking interest in the music genre, says cultural architect Risakat Okede.
These folks, these artists, have always had their own following. So even if you are Burna Boy or, Yemi Lade or something like that, and you're in Nigeria, there are Nigerians all over the world. So their music is always going to travel with the people.
Working with Billboard artists could mean a shot at global fame, says Cameroonian Afro-pop star Salatil, who recently worked with Beyoncé on the Lion King soundtrack.
Singing on the same song with Beyoncé and Pharrell Williams, it means many more people are going to look onto Salatil, the artist, who is he and how come he's on this album.
And as African artists seek to dominate new markets, it's a wake-up call that African countries need to beef up their own music industries.
I think our infrastructure needs to be tighter, like the whole African music industry in general. Like, royalties is not a thing. And I don't know how producers eat.
That means artists are taking their talents elsewhere. Several African acts have signed record deals with big American labels. Nigerian musician Iceberg Slim says that's because the world is craving an authentic taste of Africa.
We have to give them Africa, we have to give them Nigeria, we have to give them our culture. So it's definitely important that we stick to our sounds and stick to our cultures. And that's basically what we're selling them. This whole Afrobeats movement, we're just selling a culture.
And that business is booming, bringing in fans from far beyond Africa's borders. Jesusamen Oni, VOA News, Washington.
Thank you for watching Africa 54. Good night from Washington.